The UK inquiry into the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic began in earnest today. Its chair, Lady Hallet, said she intends to answer three key questions. Was the UK properly prepared for the pandemic? Was the response appropriate? And can lessons be learned for the future? Today's session began with recorded testimonies from people who had lost loved ones. Here's a flavour of a video which laid bare the human cost of the pandemic.
My brother was a 57-year-old taxi driver. Caught COVID in the back of his taxi. He was blue, couldn't breathe. His wife's a nurse, so she knew exactly what was needed. 5 weeks. We couldn't see him. Nothing. We waited one every hour, every 11 o'clock every day. My sister-in-law got a phone call from the consultant. It's the only update we had on him.
Well, suddenly I'm on my own. We were courting for 6 years. I'm married for 48. And so this affected me a lot. I'm on my own now.
My daughter said that her dad wasn't sounding really well on the telephone and she wanted to go down to see him. My daughter went down there, she said he wasn't eating, he wasn't doing anything. They tested him and they said it's definitely COVID. In the Caribbean culture, I've got to say, when there's a funeral, you're talking about hundreds of people easily. They were telling us 20 people could attend a funeral. We gave the best send-off we could, but that's not the way he would have been sent off on a normal day. No way. I'm angry. I need questions answered. I'm just still hurt and I'm still upset.
The work of the COVID inquiry will be watched closely by the bereaved families. The overriding message is that they want nothing less than the truth about how the pandemic was handled.
Today it is over 3 years since the first death from COVID-19 took place in this country. In that time, nearly 250,000 people have died from COVID, as our leaders stand accused of presiding over a carousel of chaos. Those who lost loved ones will no longer be invisible in their misery, and it is for this inquiry to illuminate the truth.
We assessed what we can expect from the COVID inquiry with Helen Puttick, who is the Scottish health correspondent of The Times. Helen, this is a very big inquiry. The pandemic, of course, affected everyone. What sort of things will the inquiry be looking at?
So this UK-wide inquiry that started today is taking in the decisions that was taken in the devolved nations and those that were taken in Westminster that covered England and the whole of the UK. As you say, there is an enormous task ahead, and the way this inquiry is working is it's broken those down into different modules that will look at a variety of questions, including decisions like the way protective equipment was distributed, decisions to discharge patients from hospitals into care homes, access to testing, and a whole myriad of other issues which have come up both during the lockdowns we experienced and since.
The chair of the inquiry has said that families will be at the heart of this. What will the families of those who lost their lives, what will they be looking for?
So there was a very moving video with some stories played at the inquiry today, and there is also a way for everyone to tell their own personal story. There is also some concern, though, from some campaign groups that they're not being as well represented as they would like in the current hearings that are planned. So there is a mixture of feelings, perhaps, as we reach this stage of the process. I think people are looking for different things perhaps from this inquiry. On the one hand, this is about learning lessons because there have been pandemics before, there will probably be some in the future, and we need to plan for those. We need to plan much better than actually we planned for what happened in 2020. But of course, other people might be looking for blame to be rested on shoulders. They may be looking for some kind of closure in their personal journey, and it's not at all certain that they will get the satisfaction that they need.
So it wouldn't be a guilt or innocence at the end of this? It's nothing like a trial?
I think that's right. And of course, it's really hard to lay any individual blame here, because if we wind back to the start of 2020, there was so much we didn't know about COVID-19 that we do know now. And I think there will be a degree of sympathy for decision makers about dealing with an unprecedented situation. At the same time, it was good to hear today some hard questions being asked, like the way we went into lockdown without enough questioning of the impacts that might have on businesses and that might have on education. So hopefully, whilst understanding the context, there will also be some difficult issues addressed.
It's going to be a long-term inquiry. We're looking at about 3 years before it reports. That's a long time to wait. Will we hear anything in the interim?
There is talk about hearing from the inquiry at stages, particularly as the information's being divided down into these separate topics or modules. Experience from other inquiries might suggest it'll be 3 years at least, and potentially much longer than that. And perhaps in this case, that might be the right thing. As I say, there's going to be other pandemics in the future. If we're going to do this properly, then actually drawing out the lessons so we are better prepared next time around makes some kind of sense. Otherwise, why undergo the process in the first place?
How much will Scotland feature in this inquiry? There is to be a separate Scottish inquiry, of course, but how much will Scotland feature as part of the UK inquiry?
I think some of that's to be seen, because the inquiry website is very clear that the devolved nations are part of this process. At the same time, they say they will try to avoid duplication with other probes, such as the one taking place in Scotland. But given they're happening sort of at the same time, but with a bit of a time lag in Scotland, it's hard to know how they will be informed about what each other is doing as it goes along. And I would imagine that families who are living in Scotland and looking for answers from the Scottish inquiry would also really like their say at the UK-wide investigation. So I imagine both inquiries will end up looking at the devolved nations in some detail.
The inquiry started today. It's expected to last, as we've said, for 3 years, a long time. The Swedish inquiry has already been and reported. Why are we taking so long?
If you look at the way that inquiry in Sweden was carried out, I don't think it would satisfy what much of the public seem to want in the UK. As I understand it, they heard from about 100 witnesses, so that would be far short of the numbers of people who are wanting to participate in the UK process. It could well be argued that it's taken a long time to get this going in the UK. However, there are other nations, the United States, for example, which are taking even longer to really get to the nitty-gritty of this. So it's a mixed picture internationally, and you could argue, as I said before, that it takes time to get these things right.
Helen, thanks for joining us in Scotland tonight.